Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Gope Janavalabha Girivaradhari Gope Janavalabha Girivaradhari Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yashodanandana Brajajanarandana Yamunatira Vanachare Yamunatira Vanachare Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Vihari Jai Radha Govinda Radha Govinda Shri Radhe Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Prabhupada Srila Prabhupada ki Grantara Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki Nittai Gopuranande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Reading from the Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, second canto, chapter 6, entitled Purusha Sukta, confirmed. Today we are taking a look at text number 46, the last verse of the chapter. 2646. Pradhanyato yandrisha amananti Līlavataram purushasya bhunaha Apiyatam karunakashaya shoshan Anukramisheta iman supeshan Pradhanyato yandrisha amananti Līlavataram purushasya bhunaha Apiyatam karnakashaya shoshan Anukramisheta iman supeshan Pradanyatoyam rishamananti
Līlavataram purushasya bhūna
Līlavataram purushasya bhūnaha
Apiyatam karnakashaya shoshan
Apiyatam karnakashaya shoshan
Anukramishyetanimam supeshan
Anukramishetaimam supesham Pradanyatoyam rishamananti Līlavataram purushasya bhūnaha Apiyatam karna kushaya shosham Anukramishetaimam supesham Pradanyatoyam rishamananti Līlavataram purushasya bhūnaha Apiyatam karnakashaya shosham Anukramishetaimam supesham Pradhanyata chiefly young all those Rishe or Narada Amananti worship Lila pastimes Avataram incarnations Purushasya of the personality of Godhead Bhūma the Supreme Apiyatam in order to be relished by you Karna ears Kashaya foul matter Shoshan that which evaporates Anukramishe shall state one after another Te they Iman as they are in my heart Supesham all pleasing to hear O Narada, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnations of the Lord known as Leela avatars. Hearing of their activities counteracts all foul matters accumulated in the ear. These pastimes are pleasing to hear and ought to be relished. Therefore, they are in my heart. Purport. As was said in the beginning of Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam, one cannot be fully satisfied by hearing unless and until one is given a chance to hear of the transcendental activities of the Lord. Brahmaji is also trying in this verse to stress the importance of narrating the transcendental pastimes of the Lord as he comes and manifests himself here on the surface of the material planets. Every living entity has a tendency to hear pleasing messages, and as such, almost every one of us is inclined to hear news and talks broadcast by the radio stations. This is before streaming is possible. But the difficulty is that no one is satisfied at heart by hearing all those messages. The causes of such dissatisfaction is the incompatibility of the message with the innermost stratum of the living soul. This transcendental literature is especially prepared by Śrīla Vyasadeva to give the utmost satisfaction to the people in general by narration of the activities of the Lord, as instructed by Sri Narada Muni to Śrīla Vyasadeva. Such activities of the Lord are principally of two varieties. One concerns the mundane manifestation of the material creative force, and the other deals with his pastimes in the form of different incarnations in terms of the time and place. There are innumerable incarnations of the Lord, like the waves of the river, flowing constantly in and out. Less intelligent persons take more interest in the creative forces of the Lord in the material world, and, being disconnected from their relationship with the Lord, they put forward many theories of creation in the name of scientific research. The devotees of the Lord, however, know well how the creative forces work concurrently by the action and reaction of the material energy of the Lord. Therefore they take more interest in the transcendental activities of the Lord as he incarnates himself on the surface of the material world. Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam is the history of such activities of the Lord, and people who take interest in hearing Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam clear their hearts of accumulated mundane filth. There are 1,001 rash literatures on the market, but one who has taken interest in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam loses all interest in such filthy literatures. Shri Brahmaji is thus attempting to narrate the principal incarnations of the Lord, so that they may be drunk by Narada as transcendental nectar. Om Jnana-timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmritam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Gadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamanam Shri Gurun Vaishnavangscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaguna Raghunatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaguna Lalita Shri Vishakam Vitamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Gaurange Radhe Vrindavanishvare Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranamami Hari Priye Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. O Narada, now I shall state one after another the transcendental incarnations of the Lord known as Leela avatars. Hearing of their activities counteracts all foul matters accumulated in the ear. These pastimes are pleasing to hear and ought to be relished. Therefore they are in my heart. It is very interesting if we look at the philosophy of education of the Bhagavatam, at least of the whole Vedic period, and compare it with that of the modern world. And we'll see, for example, it is a challenge in each generation to somehow or other educate people, because human beings, that is our strength, that we can be educated. Like animals, in one sense, they are more hardy than humans. Like if you look at the animals, some animals are born, and then before the end of their day, they're ready to go. You know, like it takes a little while for them to get onto their feet, but you know, by the end of the day, they're good, and then they can take care of themselves. They can run around and they can eat. A human being is very useless. Well, a human being is like very weak, very useless for a long time. Like completely not even able to walk, is completely dependent, very susceptible to disease, like what to speak of any kind of predator. So a human baby is in one sense, in that sense, very weak. But we see that the amazing ability of the human child is that it can really be changed a lot. And we can see if you take a child from Korea and you pop him in a home in America, how American that child becomes, how much that child can be influenced by the environment in which it is put. And it acquires a whole different language and a whole different culture. So we see that the human child is very moldable. So that then is the unique feature of human society, is that people can be changed by education. Not completely. Was it not John Locke? Who was the tabula rasa? Was that Locke?
Oh, yeah, John Locke.
John Locke had his theory of the idea of the blank slate. Every human being is born completely as a blank slate. Now, over the years, we've seen that also obviously is not exactly true. You are born with quite, not even partially true. Yeah. I mean, we are born with quite a certain kind of conditioning that is there within us. But still, by education and culture, one can do quite a bit to change your destiny. Now, how do we go about doing that? Well, for example, in the modern world, you see if you go to school, you would learn so many technical things, so much technical stuff. And if you want to go to school to become a business manager, then you'd have all these charts and graphs, little bullet point lists of what it says, this is what a manager does, this is what this, it's like all, they sort of break it down, analyze it, and then try to feed it to people. But it's boring as hell. And it's interesting that many people who are actual managers, if you look at specifically families that have done an occupation for a long time, they know that the real way you learn something is by seeing it. Simple as that. Like in India, they would have these big finance families, and then their children, they wouldn't send them to university. When they're 12 or so, they would immediately start working in the business. They start from the bottom, and then they work their way up. And one day that child will become the owner of the whole business, but they're not going to send him to school and college because they've seen it doesn't work, actually wastes a lot of time, because you have that critical period in which you have the ability to learn by example, to see how things are done. And now you're going to waste it sitting in a classroom somewhere instead of learning from your father. He's been doing it for so many years. He can teach you, you can see it in action. There's this famous story of Chhatrapati Shivaji, the famous king in Mumbai, for flying to the Mumbai airport. You'll see the airport is named after him. And he was the one who stopped the Mughals at Mumbai. That's why there's such a big difference between North and South India. Because South India was never conquered, at least in that section. British later took it over, but that's why South India is much more maintained culturally. The temples and stuff is in much better condition. Because he's the one who stopped them with the elephants. They came, even Alexander was stopped by the elephants. It was just too much for them, these warrior elephants. But anything, the first tanks, yeah. So, but where did he learn how to rule? Shivaji, where did he learn? What college did he go to? It must have been an amazing school, isn't it? I mean, geez, he must have had some serious education in order to be such a wonderful ruler. His mother read him the Mahabharata every single day while he was growing up. Everything he learned, he said everything he learned about how to rule a kingdom, he learned from the Mahabharata. Why? Because that's how you see. You see people in specific situations, and that's actually what it deals with. The technical things you learn on the job, but the actual thing that you need is by example. So similarly, if you think about, say, something like marriage, getting married, that nowadays so much education has to be there and trying to teach people how to be a husband or a wife. But where do you actually learn it? You learn it from your parents. In a healthy culture, you see it. You just see how they do it, and then you basically imbibe it. Just like you learn a language, for example. How do you learn a language as a child? You just hear it. You just soak it up like a sponge, and it just becomes part of you. But you get much more than a language. You get the whole culture, the whole consciousness of your parents. It just gets absorbed into you. And it is like something physical. It's like a real thing. It's not just like a psychological thing. It becomes part of you. So very fascinating then how much we can absorb. So keeping this in mind then, if you look at the modern world and you see how loose and how casual the modern world takes the content that we absorb, is astounding. So even in South Africa, up until 1994 in South Africa, where they had a very conservative government, was in some sense very bad, but in one sense, even up until 1994, there was this idea of censorship, that the government will censor things. Like Elvis Presley, there was way too much hip action in his dance, so he wasn't allowed. It was like censored for quite a while. Same goes for many literatures. It was like porn. Forget about it. Porn, it's like there was no such thing there like allowed in the country. No ways. Why would they do that? Why would you allow your citizens to be flushed with porn? Like allow porn in your country. Why would you do that? So they had so much censorship against certain things because some of the understanding was there that these things are bad. They couldn't exactly, but everybody just knew intuitively, listen, if you're going to just look at a lot of violence and sex, it can't be good for you. But nowadays, over the years, we've come to this point where you have big arguments, where people are arguing, does it really do anything to you? Like, why is it so bad, these things? So because we don't understand that is how we absorb things. When you look at this stuff, when you look at how people interact with one another, it's not just entertainment. There's no such thing as entertainment without consequence. Whatever you look at, you will absorb it and you internalize it, and it cannot be stopped. And whenever you come under certain situations, especially situations of stress, then you will just revert back to whatever is the most strongest conditioning within you. And therefore, who is it? Bharata Muni, who was the ancient composer of the Natya Shastra, which is the Vedic science of drama. And therein he lays out all the details of how drama is a fascinating thing, because in one sense you have a group of people standing on the stage and doing something, and then they induce in their audience a certain kind of ras, a certain emotional experience, by basically faking it. But somehow something real happens, and we see that it's a big part of culture. Everybody is like a very serious part of our life. Even now, even people work so hard, but what do people do? They watch series, because they need some ras. Somehow by watching these things on the screen, you get some emotional experience. So it's very powerful. And Bharata Muni, he says that one has to understand that the purpose of drama is not entertainment. There might be some entertainment happens as a side consequence, but the purpose is not entertainment. The purpose is you transport people to another dimension, and there you confront them with ethical and moral issues, and you help them resolve it in that dimension. And then when they come back down to their daily life, they bring that with them. So that's the thing. When you do your entertainment, you go somewhere. You go into that movie, you go into that thing. But when you come back, you don't come back empty-handed. You come back with something. You've taken something from that. You've taken a certain sense of idea of how the world works and how situations are supposed to be resolved. And you take it back into your own life. And you sit with that expectations and that ideals, and it sticks with you. Therefore, Bharata Muni says that these things are very, very serious business, actually, the kind of entertainment that is going on in the kingdom. And he says that, therefore, a playwright or a dramatist who writes dramas or plays in which sinful people are portrayed to be successful and happy, he says that playwright is sinful, and he will get heavy reaction for writing that thing. Because the reality is that the world does not work like that. It doesn't actually work like that. If you have bad character, and if you're a bad person, you will suffer. Not necessarily immediately. You might be rich and stuff, that's true. But in your actual day-to-day experience, there will be hatred and there will be envy. And how can there be happiness there? But it is portrayed like that. And we see people, I remember once you see so many, if you look now at the modern entertainment, it's astounding just how they portray things, especially the relationship between men and women. They give a certain idea of how it works, but it doesn't work like that. It doesn't actually work like that. If you actually try to live like that, you will see that it doesn't work. So therefore, these things are dangerous. And therefore, the Bhagavatam speaks about kashaya, karma kashaya, the foul matter in the ear. Because the Bhagavatam is very oral. You can imagine at that time, a lot of it was about hearing. And there was no so audio-visual. Nowadays, we each have TV. But in the past, it was things going into the ear, and then the mind creates an image. But it means everything that goes into the ear, through the eyes, it's dirt. Therefore, the Bhagavatam uses this image to speak about the vid bhujam, nunam devena vihita, gashtam, what's that verse, it's third canto, where Kapila Dev says, people who are absorbed in the illicit affairs, the sordid affairs of mundane individuals, just normal, mundane, simple people. You get absorbed, people who have a taste for these people's affairs, how they conduct their affairs in life, which is what most TV is. It's just sinful people that are having sex and fighting with one another and whatever, just their normal life. And somehow we are absorbed in it. Somehow it is so interesting to watch. Even reality TV, amazing. Just the most base people. Like the two most famous reality TV shows, from some of the highest ratings, was made by two, or basically centered around the lives of two women. And the only reason they became famous is because they released a sex tape of themselves. And therefore they became famous. That's why they became famous. And people basically absorbed in their lives. So the Bhagavatam says, Kapila says, people who become absorbed, who have a taste for the mundane affairs of sinful people, he says, these people are condemned by divine order. And they reject, because that means they've rejected the absorption in the transcendental activities of Krishna. Just like animals that eat stool, the vit bhujam. Such a heavy image, this idea of the stool eater. It's used again and again, the vit bhujam. But it is very, Bhagavatam, it is a heavy image. Because the reality is that it is difficult for people to understand. People cannot draw the connection between their own dissatisfaction, their horrible conditions of their relationships, their own mental agitation, and the content that they consume. They don't draw the connection. They can't understand that this is where it's coming from. And therefore it is a crisis. Speak about the pandemic. That is the pandemic. That you have billions of people that are just constantly filling their consciousness with content that is ruining their chances of being successful or happy in this life. And no one is telling them that this is where it's coming from. No one is saying it. And no one is censoring anything. No one is protecting the people in any case. The government has no regulation on what kind of things are produced, and no one can do any censorship. And even parents are not able to censor their children, because the culture is now of such a way that if you try to censor your kids and try to control what content they consume, there is so much kickback that you will receive, because no one is doing it. So that is the great crisis that we are actually facing, and no one can see where it's coming from. And people can't stay married. Of course they can't stay married. How many dramas or shows do you see of normal, happy people that are actually living a relatively sane life? That's not what people look at. You look at all this debased families that are completely dysfunctional, they don't function properly. So where are people supposed to imbibe examples of how things are supposed to be going? It's very fascinating. I remember once I had one friend, he was a guy, a very good friend of my father, and somehow he was a builder who worked at our house. He came working in a house, and somehow he and my dad became friends. It was very ironic because he was like 5'2", my dad is like 6'5", and my dad was a police officer for many years, and this man, he was in prison for many years because he killed someone. He stabbed someone once and he killed him. So he was in prison, he's covered with tattoos. But all the suffering that he had experienced in his life had purified him like anything. He had become, after so many years of violence and that cycle of violence and abuse, he had come to the point where he had become so averse to suffering, to causing suffering to others and to having suffering caused upon him. He became actually a very sober person, very spiritually inclined actually. And he also took to the practice of Krishna consciousness with quite some enthusiasm in his own way. Obviously his life situation was very difficult, but still he chanted and he was really interested. He couldn't read. It was very interesting. The first person I preached to who couldn't read, so very difficult, and he couldn't understand English so well. So it was very difficult to give him. He wanted to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness. It was very difficult because there was no books and he couldn't understand English. So what content was there? And I was really, I was thinking, wow, it's so amazing that you have these devotees who are literate and intelligent, but they're too damn lazy to read. And it's such a disaster. When you look at this poor guy who has this sincere desire to be absorbed in Krishna consciousness, but there's no way, he doesn't have anything, there's no content for him. So in any case, we tried our best. I wrote some things in Afrikaans that he could read and gave him the mantra. But in any case, he would spend some time at our house. No, we're just normal people. Parents are just normal, been married for many years. They're just like normal, relatively stable people. Nothing extraordinary. But he would tell me later, he told me that, you do not understand how much I am healed by just being in this house sometimes and seeing how you relate with one another. Because he said, I grew up, I was heavily abused by my father, by my stepfather. I mean, his whole domestic life is just a complete disaster. And he said he never knew how it's supposed to look. He said he knew that, okay, people get married and they have children, but he never knew how it is supposed to function. Because he never saw it. So how is he supposed to be able to do something if he's never seen it? And he said just by being around just a normal family, how much it has healed his heart, and how much he has now understood how people are supposed to treat one another and all these things. Because if you don't see it, how can you do it? So therefore the Bhagavatam is very heavy, and it is saying, don't be a vitbhujam, don't be a stool eater. And the stool eaters are animals like specifically dogs and hogs. They are the two animals that by nature, you see each animals are very interesting because they're built into their conditioning. They have a certain attraction to a certain kind of food. So you will see, if you go to cows, for example, and you give them something, what does an animal do? It smells it. It goes and it and then just by smelling, it will decide, will I eat this or not? They have no idea, or is it clean or unclean, or is it organic or not organic, or, is there sugar in there? What's the kilojoule value? They have no intellectual overlay. They just simply sniff it. And then by sniffing, then they know, okay, do I like this or not? Then you will see most animals, if you offer them stool, like a cow, they just don't eat it. Just like, we don't eat it. It's not appealing. If you smell it, it doesn't look particularly nice, and you're going to eat it. You don't eat it. But the dog and the hog, the two animals, even though we pep our dogs up so nicely and we think that's wonderful, but they are by nature actually very dirty animals. Like a dog will eat mostly anything. Nowadays, domesticated or Western dogs are quite spoiled. Some of them are used to just eating, whatever, steak and burgers or whatever, amazing American dogs for quite a fortunate birth. But in general, you will see in India especially, they'll eat anything, like rotten stuff or even stool. So by their conditioning, they're somehow attracted to it, therefore considered a very faulty animal. And it's sometimes interesting if you see people walking with their dogs, and then the dog sees something very gross, like a dead rotten bird or something, and he just goes for it, and then the owner tries to restrain him. Because, then you get this dog that's filled with all this rotten stuff. But similarly, we are also actually like that. Yeah? You see this sordid, rotten things, this rotten affairs being projected, and then somehow you just want to lap it up, just like a vitbhujam. So therefore the Bhagavatam uses these words. It is heavy, but at the same time, it is serious business, and it is true. Somehow we all have a natural inclination and a taste to hear about things that are sordid. And it's the great disaster of conditioned life. And therefore the Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam is a revolutionary literature. But then we think, what is the revolution? But that is the revolution. It gives you the images, it gives you the examples of devotees that have, as they transgress through the various phases of life, and what they do in these situations, how they act. And not even that, it gives you avatar kata. It explains the pastimes of Krishna himself, who comes into this world. We speak about the movie. Imagine, think about the arrangement that is behind creating a movie. Millions of dollars, you hear it, $50, $100 million, some of these big creations. They've built big sets, this whole massive design to just create at the end this little this image, this square image of something happening, some lights on the screen. So when you think about Krishna, he comes into the world and he does exactly the same thing. But the whole world is his stage. He creates he creates in real life. He creates dramas by actually enacting things within this world for the sake of creating content that the conditioned souls can absorb their consciousness in. And by simply absorbing your consciousness in that, in the activities of God, everything becomes healed. Your misconceptions, your ideas, how to act or not, it all becomes automatically imparted just by absorbing oneself in the consciousness of the Lord, because that is how we are made. We are ultimately made to just imitate. And that's what we do. We learn by imitation. That's what all human beings do. And it all just depends on what you are absorbing yourself in, because that you will inevitably imitate. So a very great medicine, therefore, the Bhagavatam is explained to be Oshada, a medicinal book which has the capacity to heal the conditioned soul of all its misconceptions. And it has to be taken up with some seriousness, because unfortunately there is always that interest that remains for mundane things. It's just there, like a conditioned taste. Just like growing up, sometimes we would visit some of my friends on farms, or sometimes you go to these like farms, and then sometimes they have these very exotic animals like cheetahs, like you can have a cheetah and you can make a cheetah tame. So certain animals you can tame, but certain animals you can't, like a leopard or a lion. They can never be tamed, even if you grow up with it. They always look, they can become very tame, just like house cats. It's an amazing thing to see like a cheetah as a house cat, or a lion cruising there, and they're very tame and you can rub them. But if you feed them blood, then they somehow become violent again. Then they become very erratic if they eat too much blood. It's very interesting, these wild animals. So they know you have to feed them certain things to keep them peaceful. So similarly, we are actually also a little bit like that. We have become domesticated to a certain extent, and we are practicing the process of Krishna consciousness. But that desire, just like the desire for blood, it stays within that animal's conditioning. Similarly, unfortunately for us, for a long time, that innate tendency, that innate desire to hear that which is mundane and actually sinful, it somehow stays in the heart. And one just has to be very careful and to deal with it. But by prolonged hearing, the heart becomes fully cleaned. Like it says here, Karna Kasaya Shoshan. It evaporates the foul matter in the ear. And then one actually becomes, like what the Bhagavatam says, is a Paramahamsa, like a swan. Just like a crow, which is naturally inclined to eating filth. A swan only eats very pure things. So that is the real state. At a certain point, one actually becomes only interested in that which is pure. But in the meantime, what to do if the taste remains no problem? If the taste is there, no issue. Just hear then with great determination. Just continue hearing what is positive. And even sometimes if you have a total relapse, like for example, in our movement, just like in the rest of the world, a big thing is pornography. Big thing. Many devotees actually struggle with it. Because why not? It's like, was it once, Jadvaita Maharaj, I asked him once, I was preparing for the seminar on software for devotees, like how to use your computer, like Sanskrit dictionaries and these things, all kinds of software you can use that helps you in your studies of Prabhupada's books. And then he was giving me a list of good software, and then he said, oh yes, and every devotee, they should also have a really good porn filter on their computer, on your browser. And I was like, wow, interesting. He said, yeah. He says, no. He says, why are you so shocked? He says, you have the most intelligent people in the world. You have Ivy League graduates. They are being paid 6-figure salaries to figure out ways how to get the whole world addicted to porn. And you're just a little jiva cruising there in cyberspace, thinking that you're safe and sound. He says, are you stupid? It's like, that is a dangerous world. And there are sharks, intelligent sharks out there that will find ways to bait you, to get you into gambling, pornography, or whatever it is, because that's how they make money. So he says, why protect yourself? Don't be stupid. It's like if you go out in a dangerous place, you have to understand how tiny you are. So we see that, what to do then? And what my advice to people, like even the devotees who I say addicted to porn, or somehow can't stop hearing about mundane things, the thing that you need to be able to learn is that just even after you've binged watched on something horrible, then you should be able to take up the Bhagavatam right out and just start reading. Because that's your only hope. Your only hope is to go for the positive. Even if you go for the negative and you can't help yourself, just pull yourself back as soon as you can, and then just again hear the positive. Because that's the actual Bhagavatam message. The Bhagavatam message is saying that it's very difficult to overcome that taste. But if you can just somehow or other continue to put the positive in, just continuing to put that positive in as regularly as you can, then slowly everything will be changed. Just like Prabhupada said, if you have a glass and if there's some ink in water, it spreads out through the whole thing, you cannot purify it. But if you just keep pouring in clean water, at a certain point the water becomes purified. So therefore that is actually, we are saying, just keep adding the positive, regardless of whatever happens. And even if you can't help yourself and your conditioning overcomes you, what to do? Just as soon as possible, come back to the positive and continue pouring it into your ears. And with time, everything will become purified. Okay, let us hear if you have any questions or comments on this verse. Yes, Alex.
From my experience, the language I learned early was rewards and no rewards, sort of like actions.
Mm.
So I sort of mentioned that. And then two, I say I have an idea, a brilliant idea for the situation with television. I think that we should like maybe like put our minds together and like maybe what's the word, protest or make the changes to the law of TV, television, where it doesn't take away like the normal commodity of the Maya, but have two different channels. Like maybe how you turn on the TV, there's cable and there's TV, right? So have totally separate, like cable would be like for all those, and the others are specifically spiritual.
Mm.
Like broadcasting like this of all different channels. So then if you're a person that is watching TV, you have a choice consciously whether to flip to the normal TV or the spiritual TV, but they're not the same. They're totally different aspects.
Yeah.
And I think that is actually possible to implement as a law because it doesn't really take away from the freedom of watching TV.
Yeah, you give people still a choice.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what we need.
And
We
that
need.
benefit all of us too. Like
We need big devotional production companies that can start making TVs and dramas and just create a whole channel of content.
It's quicker to make a change if you actually go to the authorities first. Because then they're the ones that really
You could try it out. You should try it out. You should give it a shot. You should dream big.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
I'm just saying for anybody listening on
Yeah.
this, like, has the resources, I believe that is possible.
That is definitely possible.
Yeah.
That is the hope.
Because
Okay.
actually there's money to be made with spirituality, so it benefits both parties.
Yeah.
I have one question. I like the whole class, it's amazing. There's maybe one comment, one question. At least the kids that I grew up with, they like to play video games. Most of the video games they play are shooting
games, yeah.
like anything. There's even a video game called Grand Theft Auto where you're like a regular guy, but you get all these guns and you just go around shooting civilians.
Hijacking cars.
And then people wonder why
Yeah.
that actually happens in real life. People are bewildered. Like, I can't believe there's.
Yeah. And I think in the later GTAs you can even go to prostitutes. They even build that in. Amazing.
Yeah, you could do anything in that game.
Yeah.
Anyways, one point you made, if I heard you right, you were saying that certain types of emotions will bring us back to our innate conditioning. And you said especially stress. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes. In the great times of stress, you go back to your even the military, they say under times of stress, you just go back to your highest level of training. You just go back to whatever conditioning is the strongest within you. You will just draw back to that. And we see that under times of stress, people go back to their actual conditioning.
So is that part of the reason why maybe some devotees have temporary fall downs because maybe they're overloaded with
Oh yeah,
stress?
definitely. That's how the material energy knocks you down. She puts you under a high cooking situation and then you go down. Therefore we see that base emotions like fear, anger, so all things that cover the consciousness. So under high times of stress, the high anxiety, you see when people, for example, if there's a lot of anxiety, people become very selfish. Every man for himself. If people are very afraid, they become very, very selfish. It's very difficult to be giving or be considerate under time. Only great saintly people, they can do it. People are very attached. Under great times of stress, they can still stay peaceful. But the average person, even people who under good situations, they'll be very nice actually. Even devotees, you'll see. Therefore we see that a big part of organization, or Prabhupada says the purpose of an ashram is to create conditions even in which average people can at least be easier for them to be spiritual. Therefore, good organization of the country, it makes it easier for people to be spiritual. But if there's a lot of violence and strife and a civil war, then it becomes difficult. It becomes difficult for people to manifest these higher qualities. And that is then the irony, that's the problem then with impiety. That's why we follow the four regulative principles. The four regulative principles are not in and of themselves spiritual. There's nothing spiritual in these four regulative principles. They don't make you spiritual. You can have a complete atheist in theory that can also follow the four negative principles. Like I know some mathematicians, for example, they do that, studied math for a while and then got into reading all these biographies of mathematicians, and then some of them, they don't have sex, completely celibate, because they're just doing math. They have no interest in physical bodily sensations, they're just doing math the whole time. So they're following the four negative principles, but no belief in God or anything transcendental. So why are these four negative principles so important? Because if you break any of these four negative principles, then your life will become chaotic. That's where sinful reaction comes. And sinful reaction, it causes chaos in your life. And that chaos makes it impossible for you to be transcendental, to manifest higher qualities. Because then, so much of your life is just spent in dealing with the consequences of your bad karma. Like you see, whatever, say you have a broken marriage. So the big trauma with a broken marriage, for example, is that so much time, God, so much time will now be spent in dealing with the consequences of that. Financially, psychologically, emotionally. So therefore, when these reactions come that cause bad health, or what's the other one? Addiction. Like say you become addicted to something, then 90% of your time goes into struggling with the reality of your addiction. You've now become addicted to alcohol or porn or whatever it is, and then your whole consciousness is consumed by it. So therefore, pious karma, Krishna also says, Yesham tvanta gatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvanva moha nirmukta yajante dridavratam, something like that. That's it. So then, what does it mean? He says that those people whose sinful reactions have been destroyed by piety, pious people, whose sinful reactions have been destroyed, they can be very firm in their determination to worship me. Because sinful reactions ruins your ability to be determined. And that's what we call stress. Stress means generally it comes as a result of becoming too entangled with matter. And that's the consequence. So in this thing, that has to be understood. That's the benefit of piety and somehow creating a calm, peaceful life. And therefore Prabhupada wanted the farms to be created. Because the farms create an opportunity for people to be stress-free. And then even people that are not spiritually that strong, if they can live in an environment that is more stress-free, even they can manifest higher qualities. And I've seen it. I've seen devotees, people can only take so much. Different people have different capacities. Some people have a capacity, they can take immense strain and immense stress, and they're fine. They can still, their mind stays strong. But then other people can't. So you have to know what is your capacity and find a situation that is suitable for you in order to manifest these spiritual qualities. And on the other side, also sometimes, therefore we have to be very forgiving and tolerant, because sometimes devotees can manifest behavior that is difficult to understand. But then it's just because a person was overwhelmed. Everybody gets overwhelmed by stress, and then they can act out in different ways. But it is not a disqualification. It doesn't mean the person is a hypocrite. It just means that, conditioning is very strong. And we all get overpowered by it at some point in time. But if we help one another by Sangha, one is actually able, that's actually what helps one another keep things up. That's what helps people deal with the pressure of life. When people are isolated, then life crushes them very easily. But if you have a strong support network, good devotional friends, and you have tight relationships with them, then when the stress of life comes, when the results of your previous actions come and they hit you in the form of bad health or financial distress or whatever it is, then you can stay up, because you have some people that help keep you up. And that's also actually in that commentary on that verse, Yesham Tvantagatam Jananam Punya Karmanam, Vishnu Chakravarti was, what is that punya? What is that punya karma that is referred to here? Is it pious deeds, mundane pious deeds? He says no. It is the associations of devotees. That is the punya karma. That is the pious deeds that will help you become freed and help you overcome the reactions of your past. So very nice. Just by somehow becoming very attached and connected to the devotees, then you become protected from stress and anxiety. Not that you won't experience it, but at least it won't knock you back down to your conditioned state of life. Okay, we'll end here. Grantra Śhrīmad-Bhāgavatam ki, Śrīla Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanande. Namo